The Discovery. Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation deck, watching the hegemony fleet grow larger against the star field. Her hands trembled as she counted the enemy vessels. 47 warships, each one 3 times the size of anything humanity had ever built. The mining colony of Epsilon 7 had become a death trap. The communication system crackled to life. "Captain, this is Dr. Marcus Chen in the research facility. We've detected massive energy buildups across the enemy fleet. They're preparing to open fire." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of the 12,000 civilians sheltering in the underground bunkers. The Colonial Defense Force had only 3 patrol ships to defend the entire system. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with a paper cup. "Dr. Chen, how long do we have?" she asked into her communicator. "Maybe 10 minutes before they're in optimal firing range." "Captain, there's something else. I've been monitoring deep space communications, and I picked up something strange. An automated distress beacon went out 30 minutes ago, but it wasn't sent by us." Elena frowned. "What do you mean it wasn't sent by us?" "The signal came from the colony, but it used encryption codes I've never seen before. The transmission went to coordinates that don't exist on any star chart. It's almost like someone else is watching our situation." Before Elena could respond, the lights in the observation deck flickered. The artificial gravity wavered for a moment, making her stomach lurch. Through the viewport, she could see the hegemony ships moving into attack formation. Admiral Thrix Korvac stood on the bridge of the hegemony flagship Dominator. His reptilian features were twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. The scales on his face gleamed under the bridge lights as he watched the pathetic human colony prepare its feeble defenses. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the humans have positioned their 3 ships between us and the colony. They're requesting communication." Korvac's forked tongue flicked out in amusement. "Put them through. I want to hear them beg." The main screen flickered, and Captain Vasquez's face appeared. Her dark eyes were steady, but Korvac could smell the fear on her even across the void of space. "Admiral Korvac," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "This is a civilian mining colony. We have no military value. Please, allow us to evacuate the civilians." Korvac leaned forward in his command chair. "Captain Vasquez, your species has something that belongs to the hegemony. This system contains minerals that we require. The humans who live here are simply obstacles to be removed." "We can negotiate," Elena said desperately. "There must be something we can offer in exchange for safe passage." "The only thing you can offer," Korvac replied, "is your complete surrender. Your ships will power down their weapons and submit to boarding. The civilians will be relocated to labor camps. This is not a negotiation. This is me being generous." Elena's jaw tightened. "And if we refuse, then you will serve as an example to other human colonies who might think to resist the hegemony's expansion." The transmission ended, and Korvac turned to his weapons officer. "Charge all primary batteries. We'll start with the human ships, then bombard the colony until nothing remains." Back on Epsilon 7, Elena stared at the blank screen. Around her, the small command center buzzed with activity as her officers tried to coordinate their hopeless defense. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, her communications officer, looked up from her console with confusion written across her young face. "Captain, I'm picking up something on the long-range sensors. It's faint, but there's definitely something approaching from the outer system." Dr. Chen's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, I'm reading the same thing. Whatever it is, it's big. Bigger than anything in the hegemony fleet. And it's moving fast, really fast." Elena felt a spark of hope. Could it be a human fleet? "Reinforcements from Earth." "Negative," Chen replied. "The energy signature is completely different from anything in our database. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." On the hegemony flagship, alarms began to sound. The tactical officer's voice was high with panic. "Admiral, we're detecting an unknown contact approaching at impossible speed. It's It's moving faster than our sensors can track. Korvac's head snapped around. Impossible. Nothing can move that fast in normal space. Sir, whatever it is, it's not following normal physics. Our computers can't calculate its trajectory because it keeps changing course without any acceleration time. It's like it's teleporting in short jumps. Through the viewport, the stars began to shift. Space itself seemed to ripple like water, and a darkness deeper than the void began to form. The darkness grew larger, and from within it came something that made every being on every ship stop and stare in terror. A human warship emerged from what looked like a tear in reality itself. But this was unlike any vessel anyone had ever seen. The ship was massive, easily dwarfing the largest hegemony battleship. Its hull was a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface, and sections of the ship appeared to fade in and out of existence. The vessel settled into normal space with a sound that somehow reached through the vacuum. Every person on every ship heard it in their minds, a deep harmonic tone that spoke of power beyond understanding. Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the intercom, filled with awe and terror. Captain, I'm reading energy signatures that shouldn't be possible. Parts of that ship are existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It's like someone built a warship out of folded space-time. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her communications console, her face pale. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel. It's human. Belina felt her heart skip a beat. Put it through. A calm, measured voice filled the command center. This is Captain David Rodriguez of the HS Prometheus. We received your distress signal. Epsilon 7. Sorry we're late to the party. Elena stared at the dark ship on her screen. Captain Rodriguez, what is your vessel? We have no record of any ship called the Prometheus. There was a pause before Rodriguez replied. That's because we don't officially exist, Captain Vasquez. We operate outside normal space, fighting battles that the regular fleet can't handle. But right now, you've got bigger problems. I count 47 hegemony ships preparing to attack your colony. On the hegemony flagship, Admiral Korvac was shouting orders at his crew. I want a full tactical analysis of that vessel immediately. How did it get here? What kind of weapons does it carry? His science officer, a nervous creature with 4 arms, worked frantically at his console. Admiral, our scanners can't get a solid reading. The ship appears to be made of materials that don't exist in our periodic table. Some sections are giving off energy signatures that violate the laws of thermodynamics. Korvac's tail lashed in frustration. I don't care if it's made of crystallized starlight. It's still just one ship against our entire fleet. Open a channel to the human vessel. The main screen flickered, and Captain Rodriguez appeared. He looked like an ordinary human, perhaps 50 years old with graying hair and tired eyes. But there was something in his gaze that made Korvac's scales itch with unease. I am Admiral Korvac of the Hegemony, he announced. Unknown vessel, you will identify yourself and explain your presence in this system. Rodriguez smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Admiral, I'm Captain David Rodriguez. As for what I'm doing here, I'm here to have a conversation with you about proper diplomatic protocol. Korvac's crest flared with anger. Diplomatic protocol. You humans are about to be exterminated. Your pathetic colony will be reduced to ash, and your species will learn to fear the hegemony. Is that so? Rodriguez asked, his voice remaining calm. Admiral, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You see, humanity has been preparing for this day for a very long time. We've been expecting visitors like you. Preparing. Korvac laughed, a harsh sound like grinding stone. What could you possibly prepare that would matter against the might of the hegemony? Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are crude. Your entire civilization is nothing but children playing with toys. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Admiral, would you like to see what human children can build when they put their minds to it? Before Korvac could respond, the Prometheus began to change. The dark metal of its hull started to shift and move like liquid. Sections of the ship folded in on themselves, revealing weapon systems that looked nothing like conventional armaments. Energy began to build around the vessel, creating a visible distortion in space. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking, "the human ship is powering up weapon systems. But, sir, our computers can't identify what kind of weapons they are. The energy patterns don't match anything in our database." Korvac felt the first stirrings of real fear. "All ships, target the human vessel. Prepare to fire on my command." Rodriguez's voice came through the communication channel, still perfectly calm. "Admiral, I wouldn't recommend that course of action. The Prometheus doesn't operate under the same rules as conventional spacecraft. Your weapons are designed to work in normal spacetime. We exist in several dimensions simultaneously." To demonstrate his point, Rodriguez gave a subtle command. The Prometheus seemed to flicker, and suddenly it was in 3 places at once. The original ship remained where it was, but 2 perfect copies had appeared on either side of the hegemony fleet. "How is that possible?" Korvac whispered. "Quantum entanglement taken to its logical extreme," Rodriguez explained. "We exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Your targeting computers can't lock onto us because we're not entirely here." Elena watched from the colony as the impossible scene unfolded. The single human ship had somehow become 3 ships, each one as solid and real as the original. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was the calm, almost bored tone in Captain Rodriguez's voice, as if he was explaining something simple to a child. "Dr. Chen," she called out, "are you seeing this?" "Captain, I'm seeing it, but I don't understand it. According to our sensors, there's only 1 ship out there, but visually we can see 3. It's like the Prometheus is existing in multiple realities at the same time." Admiral Korvac had seen enough. His fear was rapidly turning into desperate anger. "All ships, open fire. Destroy that abomination." The hegemony fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons that could crack planets sent streams of superheated energy toward the 3 versions of the Prometheus. Missile launchers fired waves of explosives that could level cities. Energy weapons that operated on principles beyond human understanding sent invisible death racing through space. Every weapon hit its target. The space around the Prometheus ships filled with explosions bright enough to blind unprotected eyes. The energy release was so massive that both the human colony and the hegemony fleet had to adjust their shields to protect themselves from the backwash. When the light faded, everyone expected to see wreckage floating in space. Instead, they saw something that made their blood freeze. The 3 versions of the Prometheus were completely undamaged. More than that, all the weapons fire had simply stopped. Every beam of plasma, every missile, every burst of energy hung frozen in space around the ships like sculptures made of light. Captain Rodriguez's voice came across the communication channels, and now there was a hint of amusement in his tone. "Well, that was impressive firepower, Admiral. Unfortunately for you, those weapons are designed to work in conventional spacetime. The Prometheus operates under different physical laws." "Different laws?" Korvac's voice was barely a whisper. "Physics isn't the same everywhere, Admiral. In the dimensions where we operate, cause and effect are more like suggestions than rules. Time flows differently. Distance becomes a matter of perspective. And weapons that depend on conventional physics become as harmless as light shows." One of the hegemony ships tried to retreat, but it found itself unable to move. Its engines were running at full power, but the vessel remained stationary. The ship's captain reported that his navigation systems insisted he was simultaneously moving at maximum speed and standing perfectly still. Rodriguez's voice continued, "Admiral, I think it's time for a demonstration of proper manners. You came here to destroy a peaceful colony. That's considered poor form in most civilized societies. The Prometheus didn't fire any visible weapons. There were no explosions, no beams of energy, no missiles. Instead, 5 of the hegemony ships simply weren't there anymore. Not destroyed, not vaporized, not blown apart. They had been edited out of existence, as if they had never been built. The remaining alien vessels began moving away from the impossible human ship as fast as their engines could carry them. But they found that space itself was working against them. The harder they tried to flee, the closer they seemed to get to the Prometheus. Admiral Korvac's voice was shaking when he spoke again. "What are you? What kind of weapons are those?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment before answering. "They're not weapons, Admiral. We simply convinced the universe that those ships had never existed in the first place. Reality is much more flexible than most species realize." The revelation. Elena stared at the view screen in stunned silence. The impossible had just become routine. 5 massive warships had simply vanished, not destroyed but erased from existence itself. The remaining hegemony fleet was trying to retreat, but their ships moved in slow motion, as if space itself was holding them back. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim said quietly, "Captain Rodriguez is requesting permission to come aboard." Elena found her voice. "How does he plan to get here?" "We haven't opened our docking bay." Rodriguez's calm voice answered from the speakers. "Docking bays are for conventional ships, Captain. We don't use normal transportation methods." Before Elena could ask what that meant, the air in the center of the command room began to shimmer and bend. Space folded inward, creating a doorway that led to somewhere else entirely. Captain David Rodriguez stepped through as casually as walking through a regular door. The portal closed behind him with a soft sound like wind through trees. Elena's security team raised their weapons, but Rodriguez held up his hands peacefully. He looked exactly like he had on the screen, an ordinary middle-aged man in a military uniform that was almost familiar. The insignia on his sleeves showed rank markers that seemed to shift and change when looked at directly. "Thank you for allowing me aboard, Captain Vasquez," Rodriguez said with a slight smile. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but our transportation methods tend to be unusual." Elena studied the man who had just walked through a hole in reality. "Captain Rodriguez, what exactly is the HSS Prometheus? That ship isn't in any of our fleet records." Rodriguez's expression became serious. "That's because it doesn't exist in your reality, Captain, not officially. The Prometheus and ships like it operate in the spaces between normal dimensions. We fight wars that regular humanity doesn't know about, against enemies that regular humanity couldn't handle." Dr. Chen had arrived in the command center and was studying Rodriguez with scientific fascination. "The technologies your ship uses, they violate every known law of physics. How is any of it possible?" "The laws of physics aren't the same everywhere, Doctor," Rodriguez explained. "In the quantum dimensions where we operate, different rules apply. We've learned to use those differences to our advantage. Gravity becomes a tool instead of a limitation. Time becomes flexible. Distance becomes a matter of opinion." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Captain, if humanity has access to these technologies, why haven't we been told? Why is the Colonial Defense Force still using conventional weapons?" Rodriguez's eyes became sad and distant. "Because, Captain Vasquez, knowledge of what we do and where we go would break most people's minds. The technologies we use require crew members to think in ways that shatter normal human consciousness. The price of operating outside reality is that you can never fully return to it." Lieutenant Kim looked up from her console, her face pale. "Sir, I'm trying to scan your ship's systems, but I can't find any conventional technology. How does the Prometheus function?" Rodriguez walked over to Kim's station and looked at her readings. "Conventional technology requires conventional physics, Lieutenant. Our ship doesn't have engines in any sense you would understand. We don't move through space. We convince space to rearrange itself around us. We don't generate power. We tap into the quantum fluctuations that exist between dimensions." Elena's mind reeled as she tried to process what she was hearing. "Captain, how many ships like the Prometheus exist?" "Currently, 12 active vessels, each one crewed by volunteers who gave up their normal existence to protect humanity from threats that exist outside regular spacetime." We can't return to Earth, Captain. We can't live normal lives. We exist in the spaces between realities, fighting wars that officially never happen. Dr. Chen stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. What kind of threats require that level of response? Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Doctor, there are things in the deep dimensions that view normal matter as food. There are races that exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously and consider 3-dimensional beings to be insects. There are weapons that can destroy entire solar systems by convincing them they never existed. The regular fleet couldn't handle even the smallest of these threats. Through the viewports, they could see the hegemony fleet still trying to retreat. But now something else was happening. Space around the alien ships was beginning to twist and distort. Their vessels were stretching like images in funhouse mirrors, growing longer and thinner as they tried to escape. What's happening to them? Elena asked. Rodriguez glanced at the viewport. The Prometheus is demonstrating another aspect of dimensional manipulation. We're stretching the space around their ships, making every meter they travel equal to a centimeter. They're moving at full speed, but they're not getting anywhere. Elena watched in fascination and horror as the mighty hegemony warships struggled against the distorted space around them. Why are you doing this to them? Because they need to understand what they're dealing with, Rodriguez replied. The hegemony has been expanding through this galaxy for thousands of years, conquering species after species. They believe they're the ultimate military power. They need to learn that humanity is not a species to be conquered. Admiral Korvac's voice crackled through the communication system, filled with desperation. Human vessel, what do you want? What are your terms? Rodriguez activated the communication channel. Admiral, I want you to return to your home system. I want you to tell the Hegemony Council exactly what you've seen here. Tell them that humanity has weapons that exist outside their understanding of reality. And if we refuse? Korvac asked, though his voice lacked any real defiance. Then you'll spend the rest of eternity trying to reach the edge of this star system, Rodriguez replied calmly. Time is relative, Admiral. We can make your journey home last forever, while only seconds pass in the rest of the universe. Elena felt sick as she realized the implications. Captain, you're talking about torturing them. Rodriguez turned to her, and for the first time, she saw the true weight of what he carried. Captain, do you know what the hegemony does to species that resist them? They don't just conquer worlds, they erase cultures. They turn entire civilizations into slave races. They've wiped out thousands of species over the millennia. Elena studied Rodriguez's face, seeing the exhaustion and pain in his eyes. How long have you been fighting them? Time doesn't work the same way for us, Rodriguez said quietly. I've been captain of the Prometheus for what feels like centuries, but according to normal time, only 5 years have passed since we left Earth. The crew and I, we're not fully human anymore. We exist partially in normal space and partially in the quantum dimensions. We can never go home. Dr. Chen looked at his instruments, trying to understand the readings from the Prometheus. Captain, according to my scans, parts of your ship are older than Earth itself. How is that possible? When you exist outside normal time, age becomes meaningless, Rodriguez explained. The Prometheus has been to the beginning of the universe and the end of time. We've seen the birth of stars and the death of galaxies. We've fought battles in the spaces between seconds. Lieutenant Kim was monitoring the Hegemony Fleet's communications. Captain Rodriguez, Admiral Korvac is broadcasting to his home system. He's telling them about your ship, about what you can do. Rodriguez nodded with satisfaction. Good. The hegemony needs to understand that humanity is not prey. We're not victims to be conquered. We're a species that will do whatever it takes to survive. Elena watched as the space around the hegemony ships returned to normal. The alien vessels immediately began moving away at maximum speed, their crews desperate to escape the nightmare they had encountered. You're letting them go? Elena asked. They'll spread the word, Rodriguez said. The hegemony will think twice before attacking another human colony. Fear is sometimes the only language that aggressive species understand. As the last of the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace, Elena turned to face Rodriguez. "Captain, what happens now? Do you just disappear back into whatever dimension you came from?" Rodriguez smiled, but it was a sad expression. "We go back to our war, Captain. Back to fighting threats that exist outside normal reality. But now the hegemony knows that humanity has guardians they can't see or understand." Elena felt a deep sadness for this man and his crew who had sacrificed their humanity to protect the rest of their species. "Is there anything we can do for you? Any way to help? Just remember that we exist," Rodriguez said. "When you look at the stars and wonder if humanity is alone in the dark, remember that there are humans out there fighting battles that can't be won, only held at bay." Dr. Chen looked up from his instruments one final time. "Captain Rodriguez, I have to ask. The technologies you've developed, the ability to manipulate reality itself, what did it cost you to learn these things?" Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "Everything, Doctor. We gave up our humanity, our ability to live normal lives, our connections to the people we love. The crew of the Prometheus exists in a state between life and death, between reality and possibility. We're not quite human anymore, but we're not something else either. We're the guardians in the dark, protecting a species that can't know we exist." Space began to shimmer around Rodriguez as he prepared to leave. "Captain Vasquez, your colony is safe. The hegemony won't return. But remember, there are threats out there that are far worse than the hegemony. If the day comes when normal weapons can't protect humanity, remember that we're out here, fighting the battles that can't be fought." Rodriguez stepped back through the portal that had opened in the air. As it closed behind him, his voice echoed through the command center one last time. "Tell Earth that the Prometheus is still on patrol. Tell them that humanity's guardians are still watching." Elena stared at the empty space where the portal had been. Through the viewports, she could see the Prometheus beginning to fade, its dark hull becoming translucent as it prepared to return to whatever dimension it called home. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim said quietly, "should we report this to Earth Command?" Elena thought about Rodriguez's words, about the crew of the Prometheus who had given up everything to protect humanity from threats that existed outside normal reality. She thought about the price they had paid and the loneliness they must feel, fighting an eternal war in the spaces between worlds. "We'll report that the hegemony fleet was driven off by an unknown human vessel," she said finally. "We'll say that the threat has been neutralized. But the details of what happened here, the nature of the Prometheus and its crew, that stays classified at the highest levels." Dr. Chen nodded in understanding. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share. As the Prometheus finally disappeared completely, Elena felt a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Somewhere out there, in dimensions that normal humans couldn't comprehend, the crew of the Prometheus continued their eternal vigil. They were humanity's guardian angels, watching from the darkness and protecting a species that would never know their names. The mining colony of Epsilon 7 was safe, but the cost of that safety was carried by people who could never come home. In the vastness of space, humanity's most terrible and wonderful creation continued its patrol, a warship that shouldn't exist but did, crewed by heroes who had paid the ultimate price for their service. Elena looked out at the stars and whispered a prayer for the guardians in the dark, knowing that somewhere out there, Captain David Rodriguez and his crew were fighting battles that could never be won, only held at bay, for the sake of a species they could never truly rejoin.